We all want to scale our operations, but ask yourself, is your business actually growing? Or are we just working twice as many hours to keep it afloat? Welcome to episode 7 of Private and Listed. Today I'm pleased to introduce Ed Huntingford, Managing Director of Huntingford Advisory. Ed has exactly the expertise and experience to discuss founder, owner-operated businesses and helping take them to the next level, mostly growth. It's an alignment with our recent episodes on preparing baby boom businesses for transition. I've known and worked with Ed in Hong Kong and Australia and Asia Pacific over many years, personally and professionally, and I trust Ed. His clients trust him, and it's to do with his expertise and being genuine. The clients have stuck with him for a long time. To be clear for everybody, we've introduced transactions and businesses to each other, and I respect Ed, and he has 100% integrity. And in this podcast, I just want to talk about what helps businesses, things that people don't know in their business when they're preparing for scaling, transitioning, or exiting. And it's something that we both do. Ed has a different skill set to me, and he's far more technically capable than I am. But I want to introduce Ed. And so, Ed, could you just tell us about yourself? Tell the listeners about yourself, your career, and the genesis of Huntingford Advisory.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie, and thanks for inviting me. So I started my career as a chartered accountant, and I moved closer towards things like business performance improvement and preparing businesses for sale when I was at William Buck, which is one of Australia's 10th largest accounting firms. I was doing tax returns and financial statements like you do when you start your career in chartered accounting in Australia, and had the opportunity to move to the corporate finance team and worked on that team for a few years and learnt a lot, and then moved to Hong Kong, where I was helping Australian food businesses get into China. Obviously, the landscape changed a bit in Hong Kong and China, not the least because of the pandemic. So I moved back to Australia, and I was a partner at a firm called Fordham, which is a really good middle market firm that's always prided itself on looking after private business owners. And then last year I took out of that firm my practice of just helping business owners with business performance improvement and preparing businesses for sale. So left behind the tax and compliance and financial statement preparation, just to focus on helping business owners prepare for sale or to grow their businesses before they do that. So that's where I am now, Jamie.
This is a really interesting topic because, Ed, I said it a minute ago, but your expertise is technical, and people that own businesses need to be able to business improve. I think in my sort of 35 years, it's been the network that I've created and an acumen to be able to position things for people. But they've got to get to that point first. And I'd love to discuss with you the key issues that business owners face when preparing for transition, scaling, or selling.
Yeah, well, as you well know, it can be a number of things. Probably the most prominent when you're looking at a business that might be facing having due diligence done on them is how tidy they are. And I mean tidy in the sense that they've got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And of course, the interesting thing about that is that the earlier you do that, even if you're holding on to the business for a few years, the likelihood that it's going to be more profitable in your hands and you get to enjoy that profitability, not just the person who's buying it. But if you think of businesses, the value of a business being related to the risk involved in the profitability and the profitability, that's what I focus on. So profitability, things like margins, everything starting at governance, going right through to the quality of the financial reporting. So things like strategy, systems and processes, policies and procedures, the organisational structure, everything that gives the business discipline and structure that ultimately helps eke out higher profit margins. And then if you think about it, all of that discipline reduces the risk. And so if you've got a higher base being the EBITDA, and you've reduced the risk, so therefore people are prepared to pay more. You've got a higher multiple, you've got a higher value. And as you well know, that sometimes takes a few years. So the earlier you start, the better, because you're increasing that value before your exit.
I think that's real. Well, I know it's important, because if you can present the business credibly, I often talk about putting data rooms together and getting the inputs right that you're talking about. Potential acquirers of businesses have their own valuation methodologies, their own reason for acquiring the business, and their own forward-looking structure of what they want to do with it. But that background and presentation is vital. And look, we've both seen large private businesses preparing for sale, but they're often the least prepared. I think we've discussed that before, and that can be exposed in the due diligence process. So you're helping to mitigate that a lot. How do you gently table to a new client about assisting them to get on track? How do you, verbally go through that with them? Because it's a new client. They think they've poured their life into their business, right? And they think that it's going well, and you're sort of looking at it and thinking there's a lot of things I need to do to get this prepared to either scale, transition, or sell. How do you table that with them?
Yeah, sometimes it's as simple as going through with them, so forcing them to go through it with me, a good old-fashioned SWOT analysis. So, you don't want to start with a full vendor due diligence process, because the client becomes overwhelmed and they get completely lost in the detail. But something as simple as forcing the client to sit down, the business owner to sit down and say, well, what are the business's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And it sounds so simple, but that's the beauty of it, right? The simplicity. And I find that when the business owner is forced to articulate things like weaknesses and threats themselves, it's one of the rare times that they're actually talking negatively and reflectively about the business, because normally, they're out and about trying to sell the business. They're either selling it to customers, selling it to staff, selling it to themselves. And so they often don't reflect in a constructive, structured way, like with me in a meeting room, what it is that is challenging the business. They might have those fears in the back of their heads. And so once we go through that process right at the start, it becomes much more patently obvious to them what the threats are. So, for example, a classic one that you and I have seen numerous times, where the contracts with customers aren't as robust as they could be, and so you're handing over a business to a purchaser. They want to be able to run that business without you being there, and if there's not something tying your customers to that business, why would they pay you a decent amount of money? Now, you might have relationships for years and years and years and not have really thought through what it would be like if you bought the business and those relationships were new. So the business owner going through that SWOT analysis with me is a very gentle way and such a simple way of getting their mindset focused on what they need to do to prepare.
Ed, people will listen to this podcast because you add a lot of value. Are there one or two things that you could say to people who have been involved in businesses for a long time? Honestly, the kids are proud of the parents. That they just don't want the business and it needs to transition. But are there one or two things that you feel that a business owner may not be aware of that should be aware of when they're setting themselves up for a transition?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the podcast, Jamie. I think that all too often people forget to point out right at the start or even along the way to the business owner, there's really two very, very key elements that they need to get right all the way along. And I go back to that issue of risk and profitability. And it also includes cash flow. I mean, profitability is not much use unless it converts into cash. And so when I talk to a business owner about the two key things they need to do, make sure you're reducing the risk in the business. And it's not a fluffy, risk management concept. It's make sure that everything in the business is bolted down tight in terms of policies and procedures, systems and processes, everything. Reporting, governance, because the tighter it is, the more likelihood that your profits are going to be reliable. And then on the second point, what's the one big thing I'd say to do? Related to profitability, I find really surprising, and you've heard me bang on about this for years, that people don't, and it's all related to profitability, people don't have a clear line of sight on their cash flow. People are doing various different things in their businesses. Some are cash flow forecasting, some aren't. Plenty of private businesses, middle market businesses, have never seen a statement of cash flows looking at their business, and certainly don't have a cash flow forecast. And in terms of understanding what it is that your business is popping out at the end, what's being converted into cash is so critical to the buyer, because that's what they're interested in. Why am I buying this asset? Now, the reason why that's great for business owners at all ends of the journey is obviously when you own the business, maximising what you can take out while you own it, the wealth you can extract is critical. And then, of course, on the end, what can you convince the buyer that they're going to get out of it when they buy it and pay you all of this money? So the two key things are focus on minimising the risk in your business, and the second key thing is make sure you have a very clear line of sight on your cash flow.
Thank you. When I talk to people about potentially exiting their businesses, I ask them circa 200 questions. And I do that because I know the person with the checkbook's going to ask 400 questions. And I've asked an awful lot of questions, got a lot of answers. And, sometimes it works out in an engagement, sometimes it doesn't work out in engagement. But there's a trust factor, and you get to a point where the person goes, okay, well, they've got some expertise and a track record. When you get a new client, how do you do that in respect of setting up the business that we've been talking about during the podcast? Do you ask them a lot of questions? Quite often when you ask people these questions, they've never been asked them before. So they look at you and go, why are you asking that? And it's because it's the universe that you're in. How do you go with that, Ed, when you get a new referral? Do you ask a lot of questions, and are they forthcoming with answers?
Well, it's funny, Jamie, because yesterday I went out to do a site visit to a prospective client, and I was greeted by one of the senior staff. The owner wasn't there yet, and he said, "Why are you here? Like, what are you hoping to achieve?" And I said, "Look, at the end of the day, you can't meaningfully add value to a business without really understanding it." And so one of the keys is obviously, interestingly enough, I like getting the business owner out of the business when I first meet them. So whether that's coming to my office to have a meeting, or whether it's going and having a coffee or lunch or whatever, take them out of their environment and find out what they really think when they're not distracted by what's going on. And then secondly, me going out to their business premises and really understanding what's going on. So yesterday, I would have ended up in every part of that business with the senior staff member and eventually the owner. And it was so valuable because it's very different what the business owner says about their business and what you can see. And then, of course, being with the business owner, doing a site visit, doing a factory tour in this case, and asking them questions, gently challenging them on things that they've said. So in this case, there was a big piece of machinery, right? And in a perfectly normal way, like we all do as human beings, they contradicted themselves. So one point they were saying, this machine is beautiful, it's a Rolls Royce, it's exactly what you need. And then the next moment they were talking about competitors who had a bigger version that were stealing sales opportunities for them. And just gently questioning them about why they didn't have the bigger machine, which in their case was more to do with the fact that they'd sort of maxed out their current footprint and were a little lacking in confidence about whether they had the cash flow to support maybe financing a new machine. That was incredibly valuable because, like all humans, what you say to begin with is not necessarily what you meant to say or what you end up thinking at the end. And so it's a process of, it's a bit like dancing or dating. Get the business owner out of the business so that they're not distracted. Go into the business yourself to understand it. And then I 100% subscribe. I think many years ago we had this conversation, Jamie, about your 200 questions. You've really got to drill down and get a lot of detail because assumptions are dangerous.
Thank you for that valuable insight and context, and I'm sure listeners love hearing a recent example. I want to ask you, it's really good. I want to ask you, when clients engage you, Ed, they first engage you, it's maybe not their intention, maybe it is, but does it inevitably lead to helping a private business owner prepare for a sale?
Yeah, it's actually really funny. I have plenty of clients who come to me where they say, "Oh, I've got a good turnover. I've got a reasonable number of employees. Things seem to be going well, but I just can't work out how to get to the next level." So when they're first inquiring, it's their sale is furthest from their mind. They're looking for growth. And then when we go through the process of really nailing down what it is to give them that reliable future profit, and they start seeing what they can achieve when they really have a bit of assistance from people who know what they're doing, then they start to think, well, hold on a minute, this business has much more value than I thought. And then they start to think about, well, what does it look like, in the next 5 years? And I did have that recently where the business owner originally, they'd grown the business to a pretty significant size. It was a fundamentally good business, but they'd sort of lost a little bit of control because they now had a management team and multiple sites, and they started to think, I feel like I'm starting to lose control as the owner and the CEO. So originally my job was to come in and help them take back control. I had an advisory board role. But as we worked through the process and smoothed things out, got the management team more aligned, put a bit more structure in there, gave a bit more transparency about the financial reporting to the CEO. The CEO, who is also the business owner, realised that, wow, he's got a pretty special business here. He's not that old, he's probably about 48, 49, so he's still got plenty of time left, but he realised this is more than just getting the business to grow. It's about preparing for the next stage. And it probably also, there's probably an element there, Jamie, where I always say to business owners, the best time to prepare for sale is when you started, and if you didn't do it then, start now. And even though I'm not intentionally trying to shift their thinking from growth to exit, they start to think a lot more long term. So I think that it's only natural that when I'm working with someone on business performance improvement, that their mind starts to think a bit more long term to the value we're creating, and then how they could realise that value.
Ed, this is extremely valuable, and I think it resonates with a lot of business owners, and I think that maybe we can do this again in future podcasts. There's a lot to discuss because we have a lot of synergies, and we both deal with the sort of same types of customers. But I know you have a valuable network across Asia Pacific because I met you there, and we've had a lot of discussions. How have you built this and network, and does it generate meaningful referrals for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't think it was intentional to begin with. So I worked on a big deal when I was sell side, which I'm not anymore. But when I was sell side, I worked on a big deal in 2016, and then it was a pretty difficult deal, to be perfectly honest. And so once that deal closed, we, being my family, were thinking, well, what do we do next? Do I just keep doing this, or do we travel? That's what precipitated the move to Hong Kong. We thought about a number of options, and Hong Kong was a good one. And then being in Hong Kong, as you know, Jamie, it's such a great place to travel from because you're so much closer to everything. It's a great travel hub. And I found myself jumping on planes and wearing out shoe leather in places like Singapore and Taipei and Japan and a little bit in Korea, a little bit in Vietnam, and the Australian, so my business has always focused on Australians doing business overseas. So I don't do a lot of inbound investors into Australia, so overseas investors. I suppose I could, but it's just not necessarily something I have. I'm busy enough helping the Australian businesses looking outwards. And I found that as you well know, we have an incredible network of Australians doing business overseas who you meet through places like chambers of commerce and professional associations. So I'm a chartered accountant, and you'd be so surprised how strong our chapters in all of those places that I just mentioned are, especially in Hong Kong. We have Chartered Accountants Australia in New Zealand has a really strong chapter in Hong Kong. And so that network has been built by jumping on planes, which I love and have the luxury of being able to do. And on the flip side, or conversely, what that's meant is that because I'm doing that, Australian business owners say, well, you give me some access because you've built networks over there and you've got some market knowledge. And so I pick up clients who might not have the same network and might not have the same understanding. And it's been really interesting in Vietnam. Vietnam's not a country that I've spent a lot of time in yet. And by just dabbling in that market and building a network there, and I've got some great contacts, Aussie contacts in Vietnam doing great business there in liquor and spirits, and an accounting firm proprietor, so an Australian accounting firm proprietor in Vietnam, all sorts of things. The value I can add to my clients when they go over there in terms of opening doors and doing due diligence on the market, making introductions, etc., it just becomes its own engine. Because I get on planes, then people say, well, he's got the network and he's got the knowledge. So it just works.
It is. It's tiring filling up passports and face-to-face meetings, but it's how you build a network, a trusted network going forward. And I can validate everything you've said. You do have a great network, and particularly, Asia and Southeast Asia. It's the future. It's the consumer future for going forward, and the biggest part of the universe. The consumers are all in Asia. I want to sort of segue into something else. You've had strong connections to politics, and I know you love red wine. So can you give me give listeners a little bit of background on the politics, and then talk a little bit about red wine? And I'm more interested to know which one's more dear to your heart.
Well, this is not. It wouldn't be the answer you would expect, but I think it's probably safer. The red wine's probably safer than the politics. So I ran for the Victorian State Parliament in 2014 for the District of Melbourne, which was a fantastic experience. I was responsible for finding a candidate for the political party that I'm still a member of, and we had a great candidate. She was wonderful, but due to some family circumstances, she had to drop out. And the planets just aligned, and I said to some of my other fellow office holders, I'm going to do it. They were very shocked because I was more the organiser than the representative, but we had a great time. It was an important state election to try and keep us in government, which of course we lost, but we did a lot of hard work, and I learnt a lot, not just about politics, but about people. So that was very rewarding, and I had a great time doing that. I worked really hard, and that was also very fulfilling. And then, funnily enough, I was trying to think when it was that I first got my love of red wine. And interestingly enough, I think it's really interesting, Jamie, the way accounting firms, it's less so now because, workplace health and safety has meant that you have to be much more careful. But traditionally in a sort of small to medium-sized accounting firm, you would, on a Friday night, go into the boardroom and you'd have a drink. Now, like a lot of young people, I started on beer and alco pops. I didn't really know much about wine. And then I found myself, it was really collegiate, the way we used to sort of sit in the boardroom and have a glass of wine or a beer on a Friday. And I suppose I just saw all of these people sharing, so it's about the sharing part, sharing a bottle of wine, talking about the wine, and it became a thing. But it's sad that we as humans maybe cannot always control ourselves when we drink alcohol, because that's meant that for workplace health and safety reasons we do that less now, that coming together to share a drink with each other. But it's a really important part. I know that I share a space with an accounting firm. That's where my office is here in Melbourne, and they get together at 4 p.m. I mean, they do have drinks. The emphasis is more on the celebrating their wins and getting together. But they get together at 4 p.m. on a Friday, so they down tools in their breakout space, the breakout space that I share with them, and it's fantastic. To see them all together, to see them celebrating the wins, and I think it's really important, and that's where my love of red wine comes from. I don't, funnily enough, I never drink alone. We don't really drink at home. Sometimes we have a glass together, but it's usually out having lunch, one of my favourite pastimes, and sharing wine with others.
Thank you. I'm going to say that the two cross the line together. So politics and red wine are both dear to your heart, and they cross the line together. I'll let you off the hook there. Look, I've just really enjoyed this podcast, and I do hope that we can do another. What if people wanted to contact you, Ed, going forward? What's the preferred methodology for you that they could get hold of you?
Look, I think the easiest thing is just to go to our website, huntingfordadvisory.com. As many people would know, I'm a prolific poster on LinkedIn, so if you look up Edward Huntingford on LinkedIn, you'll find my profile and my contact details are there as well. But if you go to the Huntingford Advisory website, my email address, my phone number, everything's there for you to contact me, and that's really the easiest way.
Look, thank you again, Ed. Really engaging, and I hope listeners have taken some value out of this. Thank you, listeners, for listening to episode 7. If you've got any questions, you can get me on Heyjamie at privateandlisted.com, and I'll look forward to future episodes. And today was really engaging. Thanks a lot, Ed. Have a great week.
Thanks, Jamie. You too.